The river current dragged her under for the third time, her cream-colored dress billowing around her like a shroud as the muddy water of the Carson River filled her lungs. Samuel Kincaid had been watering his horse upstream when he heard the commotion, the sound of men laughing and riding away at full gallop, and then nothing but the rush of spring runoff through the canyon. He spurred his bay gelding forward without thinking, his hat flying off as he pushed the animal into the churning brown water. The woman's body had already gone limp by the time he reached her, floating face down with her dark hair spreading like oil across the surface. Samuel hooked one arm around her waist and fought against the current, his boots filling with water as his horse found purchase on the rocky bank. He dragged her onto the muddy shore, turning her onto her back. Her lips had gone blue, her skin pale as milk in the harsh Nevada sunlight. Samuel had seen death before, plenty of it in his 30 years, but something about this woman's face, peaceful and young, made his chest tighten with a fury he had not felt since the war. He tilted her head back like the army surgeon had taught him at Antietam, pressed his mouth to hers and breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. Her chest rose and fell with his efforts, but she did not wake. He pressed on her ribs, water pouring from her mouth, then breathed into her again. His hands were shaking, his own breath coming hard. Then she coughed. Water erupted from her throat and she rolled onto her side, retching and gasping. Samuel held her shoulders as she vomited river water onto the rocks, her whole body convulsing with the effort. When she finally stopped, she collapsed back against him, her eyes still closed, her breathing ragged but steady. He could feel her heart beating against his forearm, fast and wild like a trapped bird. "You are safe now," he said, his voice hoarse. "I have got you." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharp with panic. They were green, he noticed, the color of spring grass. She tried to pull away from him, but her limbs would not obey, and she slumped back with a cry of frustration. "Easy," Samuel said. "You nearly drowned. You need to rest." "They tried to kill me," she whispered, her voice raw. "They threw me in." Samuel's jaw clenched. "Who?" "The Garrett brothers, Frank and William." She coughed again, wincing. "They said I knew too much, said I should have kept my mouth shut about what I saw." Samuel knew the Garretts. Everyone in Sloan knew them. They ran cattle on land they had seized from a Mexican family 5 years back, and they had their fingers in every dirty deal from here to Virginia City. The sheriff was in their pocket, along with half the town council. A woman speaking against them would not live long, not if they had their way. "What is your name?" Samuel asked Julia. "Julia Reeves." She looked up at him, studying his face. "Who are you?" "Samuel Kincaid. I've got a ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Small operation, just me and my foreman. You saved my life." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was dead. I could not breathe, could not fight anymore." "You are alive," Samuel said firmly. "And you are going to stay that way. Can you ride?" She nodded weakly. Samuel lifted her as gently as he could, surprised by how light she felt in his arms. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, he guessed, with a heart-shaped face and delicate features that would have been pretty if they were not currently mud-streaked and exhausted. He set her on his horse, then swung up behind her. She leaned back against his chest without protest, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady. The ride to his ranch took nearly an hour. Julia drifted in and out of consciousness, her head lolling against his shoulder. Samuel kept one hand on the reins and the other around her, acutely aware of every breath she took. By the time they reached his property, the sun had moved past its zenith, and the heat was beginning to build. His foreman, an older Mexican man named Diego, came running from the barn when he saw them approaching. "Mater de Dios," Diego breathed when he saw Julia's condition. "What happened?" "The Garretts," Samuel said shortly. Get some blankets and warm water. She needs dry clothes too." They carried Julia into the small ranch house, laying her on Samuel's own bed. Diego's wife, Maria, who cooked and kept house for them, arrived within minutes and shooed both men out of the room. Samuel paced the narrow hallway, his wet boots squelching with each step. Through the door he could hear Maria's gentle voice, speaking in Spanish and the rustle of fabric. Diego stood against the wall, his weathered face grim. "The Garretts will come looking for her, I know. They will not like that you interfered." "I do not much care what they like," Samuel said flatly. Diego nodded slowly. "Then we prepare." It was another hour before Maria emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "She is sleeping now. She will be weak for a few days, but she is strong. She will recover." "Thank you, Maria." The older woman fixed him with a knowing look. "You have brought trouble to your door, Samuel. Would you have left her to die?" "No," Maria admitted, "but that does not mean the trouble is any less real." Samuel spent that evening checking his weapons and boarding up the windows that faced the road. Diego helped in silence, both men understanding what was coming. The Garretts would not let this stand. They could not afford to, not if they wanted to maintain their grip on the territory. A witness to whatever Julia had seen, alive and under the protection of a rancher with a reputation for stubbornness, was a problem they would need to solve. Night fell, and Samuel sat in a chair beside his bed, watching Julia sleep. Her color had improved, the blue tinge gone from her lips, and her breathing had evened out. She looked younger in sleep, vulnerable. He wondered what she had seen that made the Garretts willing to murder her in broad daylight. Whatever it was, it must have been damning. She woke just after midnight, her eyes snapping open with a gasp. Samuel was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "You are safe," he said quickly. "You are at my ranch. No one can hurt you here." Julia blinked up at him, confusion giving way to memory. She sat up slowly, wincing. Maria had dressed her in one of Samuel's old shirts, far too large for her frame, and the fabric pooled around her like a nightgown. "How long have I been asleep?" "Several hours." "Are you hungry?" She nodded, and Samuel went to the kitchen, returning with bread, cold beef, and water. Julia ate slowly at first, then with increasing appetite, as if she had not eaten in days. When she finally set down the plate, she looked at him directly. "Why did you help me? You do not know me, and now the Garretts will come after you too." "Because it was the right thing to do," Samuel said simply. "What did you see, Julia?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting in the oversized shirt. "I work at the Silver Star Saloon in town. 3 nights ago, I was cleaning up late when Frank Garrett came in with another man. They did not see me behind the bar. They were talking about a gold shipment coming through from California, heading to the bank in Carson City. Frank said they were going to hit it on the Ridge Road, make it look like Paiute raiders." Samuel's expression darkened. "Did they see you?" "Not then. But the next day, William Garrett came to the saloon. He asked me pointed questions about whether I had been there late, whether I had heard anything. I tried to lie, but he knew. I could see it in his eyes." She shuddered. "That night they grabbed me as I was walking home. Tied me up, threw me on a horse. Frank said they were going to make it look like an accident, said the river would take care of everything. When is the gold shipment?" 2 days from now. April 15th. Samuel stood, pacing to the window. The moon was bright outside, casting silver light across his pastures. A gold shipment from California would be worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. Enough to set the Garretts up for life, or to buy them even more power in the territory. And they would kill anyone who stood in their way. "We need to get word to the territorial marshal," Samuel said. "He is based out of Carson City, but he is honest. He will listen." "It is a 2-day ride to Carson City," Julia pointed out. "The shipment will be gone by then." Then we ride to the ridge road and stop it ourselves. Julia stared at him. You would do that? Risk your life for a shipment that has nothing to do with you? It has everything to do with me, Samuel said quietly. The Garretts have been terrorizing this county for years. Someone needs to stand up to them. And besides, he met her eyes, they tried to kill you. That makes it personal. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that went deeper than words. Julia stood from the bed, unsteady but determined. Then I am coming with you. Absolutely not. You nearly died today. And I can identify them, Julia said fiercely. I can testify to what they said, what they planned. You need me. Samuel wanted to argue, but he could see the steel in her eyes. This woman had been thrown in a river to drown and had survived. She was not going to hide while others fought her battle. We leave at first light, he said finally. Get some more rest. But neither of them slept much that night. Samuel sat in the main room, cleaning his rifle and checking his ammunition. Julia joined him after an hour, moving slowly but with determination. She sat across from him at the rough wooden table, her green eyes reflecting the lamplight. Tell me about yourself, she said softly. Where are you from, Virginia originally? I fought for the Union in the war, came west after Appomattox, saved up enough for this land, built it into something decent. He ran a cloth over the rifle barrel. Nothing fancy, but it is mine. No one can take it from me. No family, not anymore. My parents died of fever when I was young. Had a sister, but she married and moved to San Francisco. We write occasionally. He glanced up at her. What about you? I came from Illinois 2 years ago. My father was a farmer, but he drank himself to death after my mother passed. I had nothing left there, so I took what little money I had and bought a stage ticket west. She smiled sadly. I thought Nevada would be an adventure. I suppose I was right about that. Working in a saloon must be hard. It is honest work, Julia said defensively. I serve drinks, I clean, I do not do anything else. The owner, Mr. Chen, he is a good man. He protects his girls. I did not mean any offense, Samuel said quickly. I respect anyone who works hard for their living. Julia's expression softened. I know, I am sorry. I am used to defending myself. They talked through the night, their conversation flowing easily despite the circumstances. Samuel found himself drawn to Julia's sharp intelligence and fierce independence. She had survived hardships that would have broken others, and yet she had not become bitter or defeated. There was a light in her that the darkness had not extinguished. As dawn broke, Diego and Maria prepared supplies for the journey. Samuel saddled 2 horses while Julia changed into borrowed pants and a shirt, her long dark hair braided down her back. She looked different in men's clothes, less delicate, more capable. Samuel found he liked the transformation. They rode hard for the Ridge Road, a narrow pass through the mountains where the California Trail descended toward Carson City. It was the perfect place for an ambush, with steep cliffs on either side and limited visibility around the curves. They arrived by mid-afternoon and found a position above the road, hidden among the scrub pine and boulders. Now we wait, Samuel said. The hours crawled by. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Samuel shared his canteen with Julia, watching her sip carefully. She had not complained once about the hard ride or the heat, though he could see the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders. She was tougher than she looked. Just before sunset they heard it, the jingle of harnesses, the creak of heavy wheels. The gold wagon appeared around the bend, drawn by 6 horses and accompanied by 4 armed guards. Samuel tensed, scanning the ridge line opposite them. There, nearly invisible among the rocks, he spotted movement. The Garretts and their men, at least 6 of them, positioned for the ambush. Stay here, Samuel whispered to Julia. No matter what happens, stay hidden. Samuel, but he was already moving, scrambling down the steep slope toward the road. He reached the wagon just as the first shots rang out. One of the guards fell from his horse, and the others wheeled around in confusion, trying to find the source of the attack. "Ambush!" Samuel shouted. "Above you on the north ridge." The guards turned their weapons toward the ridge, returning fire. Samuel took cover behind a boulder, his rifle at his shoulder. He could see Frank Garrett now, standing among the rocks, his face twisted with rage as he realized his ambush had been compromised. Their eyes met across the distance, and Samuel saw recognition dawn. "Kincaid!" Frank roared. "You are a dead man." Bullets pinged off the rocks around Samuel, and he ducked lower, returning fire. The battle was brief but intense. The guards, now aware of the danger and outnumbering the ambushers, pressed their advantage. Two of the Garrett men went down, and the others began to retreat. Frank fired one last wild shot in Samuel's direction before disappearing over the ridge, William close behind him. When the shooting stopped, Samuel emerged from cover, his ears ringing. The head guard, a grizzled man with a thick mustache, rode up to him. "You saved our lives," the guard said. "How did you know?" "I will explain everything," Samuel said. "But first, we need to get to Carson City. The territorial marshal needs to hear this." Julia appeared then, ignoring Samuel's earlier order, sliding down the slope with her borrowed pistol in hand. The guards stared at her in surprise, but Samuel just shook his head. Of course she had not stayed hidden. They rode together to Carson City, arriving well after dark. The territorial marshal, a stern man named Thompson, listened to their story with a deepening frown. Julia provided her testimony, clear and detailed, about what she had overheard. The head guard corroborated the ambush. By the time they finished, Marshal Thompson was already organizing a posse. "The Garretts have been a thorn in my side for years," Thompson said. "But I never had enough evidence to move against them. This changes everything." He looked at Julia. "You will need to testify at trial, Miss Reeves. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Julia said without hesitation. "It could be dangerous. The Garretts have friends." "I know. But someone has to stand up to them." Marshal Thompson nodded approvingly. "You are a brave woman. I will assign men to protect you until this is over." But Julia shook her head. "I will stay with Mr. Kincaid if he will have me. I trust him with my life." She looked at Samuel as she said it, and he felt something shift in his chest. This woman who had nearly died, who was risking everything to see justice done, trusted him. The weight of that trust was immense, and yet it felt right. "She can stay at my ranch as long as she needs," Samuel said. The marshal departed with his posse that night, heading for the Garrett property. Samuel and Julia took rooms at a boarding house, exhausted but too restless to sleep. In the morning, word came that the marshal had arrested Frank and William Garrett, along with 3 of their men. The others had fled into the mountains. There would be a trial in 2 weeks. Samuel and Julia returned to his ranch, falling into an unexpected domesticity. Julia helped Maria with the cooking and mending, insisting that she earn her keep. Samuel found excuses to be near the house during the day, abandoning his usual routine of checking fence lines and tending cattle. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the distant mountains. He learned that she loved books but had few opportunities to read, that she could sing beautifully, but only when she thought no one was listening, that she had a gift for numbers, and had kept the saloon's accounts when Mr. Chen's eyesight began to fail. She learned that he had nightmares about the war, that he had once wanted to be a doctor but could not afford the schooling, that he had built every fence post and corral rail on his ranch with his own hands. The attraction between them grew like a slow fire, undeniable but unspoken. Samuel would catch himself staring at the curve of her neck as she bent over her mending, or the way the lamplight caught in her dark hair. Julia would find reasons to touch his arm when they talked, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. One evening, a week after the arrest, they sat together on the porch as usual. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of sage. Julia was quiet, her hands folded in her lap. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked. "About what happens after the trial," Julia said softly. "Where I will go. What I will do." Samuel's chest tightened. He had been avoiding that thought, refusing to imagine his ranch without her presence, his days without her smile. The past week had been the happiest he could remember in years, and the thought of it ending was unbearable. "You could stay here," he said, his voice rough, "if you wanted." Julia turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Stay here. I know it is not much, just a small ranch and a stubborn cowboy, but it is honest work and you would be safe." He took a breath. "And I would like you to stay. I would like it very much." "Samuel," Julia whispered, "are you asking me to work for you?" "No." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers closing around hers. "I am asking if you might consider letting me court you properly. Because this past week, having you here, it has made me realize something. I do not want to go back to the way things were before. I do not want to be alone anymore." Tears filled Julia's eyes. "I thought you were just being kind, that you felt obligated because you saved me." "I saved you because I could not let you die," Samuel said fiercely. "But I am asking you to stay because I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I pulled you from that river and you fought your way back to life. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever met, Julia Reeves, and I would be honored if you would let me prove myself worthy of you." Julia laughed through her tears. "Worthy of me? Samuel, you pulled me from a river, you saved a gold shipment, you stood up to the most dangerous men in the territory. I am just a saloon girl with nothing to her name." "You are so much more than that," Samuel said. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You are everything." She kissed him then, rising from her chair and closing the distance between them. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as years of loneliness and longing poured out of both of them. Samuel wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling her heart beating against his chest just as it had that first day on the riverbank. But this time it was not fear that made it race. It was hope. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard. Julia rested her forehead against his, her hands on his shoulders. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will stay. Yes, I will let you court me. Yes to all of it, Samuel." The relief that flooded through him was overwhelming. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally pulled apart, they stayed close, neither wanting to break the connection. The 2 weeks until the trial passed in a haze of happiness. Samuel courted Julia properly, despite the fact that she was living under his roof. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, taught her to ride better, sat with her in the evenings reading aloud from the few books he owned. Julia bloomed under the attention, her laughter coming more easily, the shadows fading from her eyes. Diego and Maria watched their courtship with knowing smiles. Maria cornered Samuel one morning in the barn. "You are going to marry that girl," she said. "It was not a question. If she will have me," Samuel admitted, "she will. And you will be happy, Samuel. You deserve that." The trial, when it came, was a spectacle. Half the county turned out to watch. The Garretts sat in chains, glowering at everyone who entered the courtroom. Julia testified with steady composure, her voice never wavering as she recounted what she had heard and what the Garretts had done to her. The head guard corroborated her story, and Marshal Thompson provided evidence of other crimes the Garretts had committed over the years. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Frank and William Garrett were sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. Their ranch was seized to pay restitution to the Mexican family they had displaced and to cover damages. When the verdict was read, Julia reached for Samuel's hand, gripping it tightly. It was over. She was free. They left the courthouse together, stepping out into bright sunshine. A crowd had gathered, and several people approached Julia to shake her hand, congratulating her on her bravery. Mr. Chen from the Silver Star was there, beaming with pride. "You always did have spine, girl," he said. "You come back to work any time you want." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Julia said warmly, "but I think I am going to try something different." She looked at Samuel as she said it, and he grinned. They rode back to the ranch that afternoon, taking their time in no hurry to arrive. The land stretched out around them, vast and beautiful in the spring sunshine. Julia reined her horse close to Samuel's, and they rode side by side. "I was thinking," Samuel said, "about expanding the ranch, maybe getting some sheep along with the cattle. And I could use someone good with numbers to help manage the books." "Is that so?" Julia said, her eyes dancing. "And I was thinking," Samuel continued, "that I would like to build a bigger house, one with room for a family, if that is something you might want, someday." Julia pulled her horse to a stop, and Samuel did the same. She was looking at him with such love in her eyes that it took his breath away. "Samuel Kincaid," she said, "are you proposing to me?" "Not yet," he said. "I have only been courting you for 2 weeks. That is hardly proper." "I do not care about proper," Julia said. "I care about you, about us." Samuel dismounted and helped Julia down from her horse. He took both her hands in his, looking into her eyes. "Julia Reeves, I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know we have only known each other for less than a month. But I also know that I love you. I know that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I know that I want to build something with you, a home, a family, a future. So I am asking right here, right now, will you marry me?" Julia was crying again, but she was also laughing, and she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, of course yes." He kissed her there in the middle of the road, with the horses standing patient beside them and the Nevada sky spreading endless and blue above. It was perfect. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Diego stood up as Samuel's best man, and Maria helped Julia into a simple white dress that they had purchased in Carson City. Marshal Thompson attended, along with Mr. Chen and several other friends from town. The preacher from Sloan performed the ceremony under a cottonwood tree, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Julia like he was trying to make up for every lonely year of his life. The reception was small but joyful. Maria had cooked for days, and there was music and dancing and laughter. As the sun set, Samuel pulled Julia away from the crowd, leading her to the small rise behind the house where you could see for miles in every direction. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Julia said, leaning back against him. "You know, a few months ago I thought my life was over. I was drowning and I was so tired, Samuel. I was ready to let go." "I am glad you did not," Samuel said quietly. "You breathed life back into me," Julia said, turning in his arms to face him. "Not just that day in the river, but every day since. You made me want to live again, to hope again. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Samuel corrected. He kissed her forehead. "And it is going to be a good one. I promise you that." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out one by one. The ranch spread out below them, their home, their beginning. Everything they had survived, all the pain and fear and struggle, had led them to this moment. And it was worth it. The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch required constant work, And there were droughts and hard winters and all the difficulties that came with making a life in the Nevada territory. But Samuel and Julia faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing season. Julia proved to be a natural rancher's wife, though she hated that term and preferred partner. She kept the books meticulously, managed their supplies and investments, and was not afraid to get her hands dirty when necessary. She could rope a calf nearly as well as Samuel, and she had an uncanny ability to predict the weather. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from a small operation to one of the most successful in the county. 2 years after their marriage, Julia gave birth to a son. They named him Matthew, and he had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn chin. Samuel held the baby in his arms, marveling at the tiny, perfect fingers, the soft, dark hair. "He looks like you," Samuel said. "He looks like us," Julia corrected, smiling despite her exhaustion. Matthew was followed 3 years later by twin daughters, Sarah and Grace, who inherited their father's height and their mother's determination. The ranch house that Samuel had built, larger than the original, filled with noise and laughter and chaos. Samuel sometimes stood in the doorway and watched his family, overcome with gratitude for the unexpected turn his life had taken. On Matthew's 5th birthday, Samuel took his son down to the Carson River to fish. It was the same stretch of river where he had found Julia all those years ago, though he had not been back since. Matthew chattered happily about his birthday cake and the new fishing pole his grandfather Diego had made him. Samuel baited the hook and cast the line, then sat back on the bank with his son beside him. "Papa," Matthew said suddenly. "How did you and Mama meet?" Samuel smiled. "That is quite a story." "Tell me," so Samuel told him, in simplified terms appropriate for a 5-year-old. He told him about finding Mama in the river, about bringing her to the ranch, about standing up to bad men who wanted to hurt people. He told him about falling in love with the bravest woman he had ever met. Matthew listened with wide eyes. "So you saved Mama's life?" "I suppose I did," Samuel said. "But she saved mine too in her own way." "How?" "Before I met your Mama I was lonely. I did not know it, but I was. And then she came into my life and suddenly everything made sense. She made me whole, Matthew. That is what love does." Matthew thought about this seriously. "I am glad you saved Mama," he said finally, "because if you did not, I would not be here." Samuel pulled his son close, his throat tight. "I am glad too, boy, every single day." They stayed by the river until the sun began to set, catching 3 fish and losing 2 more. As they walked back to the ranch, Matthew's small hand in his, Samuel felt the weight of contentment settle over him. This life, this family, this love, it was everything he had never known to want. That evening, after the children were in bed, Samuel and Julia sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. Julia was mending a shirt, and Samuel was whittling a toy horse for Grace. The night air was cool and pleasant, filled with the sound of crickets. "Matthew asked me today how we met," Samuel said. Julia looked up from her mending, a smile playing at her lips. "What did you tell him? The truth?" "In simple terms. He is too young to understand the full story," Julia said. "The violence, the fear." "He will understand someday," Samuel said. "And when he does, I want him to know that sometimes life puts you in impossible situations. But if you are brave, if you hold on, good things can come from even the darkest moments." Julia set down her mending and moved to sit beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I still dream about it sometimes. The water closing over my head, the feeling of giving up." "I dream about it too," Samuel admitted, "about being too late, about not reaching you in time." "But you did reach me," Julia said softly. "You always reach me, Samuel. Even now, when I am lost or scared or overwhelmed, you are there. You are my safe harbor." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "And you are my heart. Everything good in my life started the day I pulled you from that river. Everything good in my life started the day you breathed life back into me," Julia countered. She lifted her head to look at him. "We built something beautiful, did we not? From such a terrible beginning, we created this." Samuel looked around at the ranch, at the house glowing with lamplight, at the corrals and barns and fields that represented years of work and love. He thought about his children sleeping safe in their beds, about the community they had built, about the respect they had earned. "We did," he agreed. "And we are not done yet. There is still so much life to live, Julia, so much more to build together." She kissed him then, sweet and lingering. "Then let us keep building, Cowboy, for as many years as we have." "For as many years as we have," Samuel echoed. The years continued to roll by like the waters of the Carson River, sometimes gentle, sometimes turbulent, but always moving forward. The children grew strong and capable under their parents' guidance. Matthew became a rancher like his father, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Sarah surprised everyone by developing a passion for medicine, and Samuel and Julia saved for years to send her to school in San Francisco. Grace married a blacksmith from Carson City and opened a general store in Sloan that became the center of the community. Samuel and Julia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming gnarled with age and work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, refined by time and shared experience into something unbreakable. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Grandchildren ran through the grass, and friends from across the county came to pay their respects. Samuel and Julia sat in chairs of honor, holding hands, watching the festivities with quiet joy. 30 years, Julia said wonderingly. "It feels like yesterday and it feels like forever." "Any regrets?" Samuel asked. Julia turned to look at him, and in her eyes he still saw that fierce, brave woman he had pulled from the river 3 decades before. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner," Samuel said. "We found each other exactly when we were meant to," Julia said wisely. Everything happened exactly as it should. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Nevada sky in shades of gold and crimson, Samuel stood and pulled Julia to her feet. "Dance with me," he said. Someone started playing a fiddle, and Samuel led Julia in a slow waltz across the grass. Their children and grandchildren watched with misty eyes as the couple who had survived so much, who had built so much, danced together in the fading light. "I love you, Julia Kincaid," Samuel whispered in her ear. "I love you, Samuel Kincaid," Julia whispered back. "Thank you for not letting me drown." "Thank you for giving me something to live for," Samuel replied. They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by family and love and the life they had built together. And in that moment, both of them knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every fear, every moment of pain had been worth it. Because it had led them here to each other, to this full and beautiful life. The Carson River still flowed through the canyon, as it always had and always would. But the story of what happened on its banks that spring day in 1875 lived on in the family that grew from it. It was told to children and grandchildren, passed down through generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, love can pull you from the depths and breathe life back into you. Samuel Kincaid lived to the age of 78, surrounded by his family, his hand clasped in Julia's until his final breath. Julia followed him 6 months later, as if she could not bear to be without him for long. They were buried side by side on the ranch they had built together, under a cottonwood tree, with a simple marker that read, together in life, together in eternity. Their descendants continued to work the ranch for generations, each one hearing the story of how it all began. How a cowboy saw a woman drowning in the river and did not hesitate. How he pulled her from the water and breathed life back into her. How from that single act of courage and compassion, an entire legacy was born. And every spring, when the snowmelt swelled the Carson River, and it ran high and fast through the canyon, someone from the family would ride down to the bank and lay wildflowers on the spot where their story began. A small ritual, a quiet remembrance, a celebration of the moment when two lives collided and became one. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving and dangerous. But it was also a place where ordinary people could become extraordinary, where courage and love could triumph over evil, where a single choice could change everything. Samuel and Julia's story was proof of that. It was proof that no matter how dark the water, no matter how strong the current, love could always find a way to save you. Their great-great-grandchildren still tell the story today, gathered around fires on cool Nevada nights, keeping alive the memory of the woman who was left to drown and the cowboy who pulled her out and breathed life back into her. And in the telling, the love story lives on, as vivid and powerful as the day it began, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and the choice to never give up.